One would naturally think that rainfall should have a pH of 7 or be neutral, because it's just rain falling. However, the gases in the atmosphere will combine with the water droplets to undergo a synthesis reaction to form acids. And as a result, it causes the pH of rainfall to be below 7 and be slightly acidic, with a pH of approximately 5.7. Three gases that do this significantly are carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, so for example, nitrogen oxide, and our sulfur oxides. So these gases come from a variety of sources, both natural, synthetic, to produce or cause our rainfall to have a pH below 7. Okay? Now, what can happen is that due to human activities, we can cause the amount of these gases to be even higher in the atmosphere than they normally would be, which would increase the amount of synthesis reactions that occur, pushing the pH down below 5.6. So therefore, any rain with a pH below 5.6 is said to be acidic. Now, carbon dioxide will combine with water droplets in the atmosphere to produce carbonic acid. Carbon dioxide produced naturally through the decaying organic material, or when we go through cellular respiration. However, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increased significantly due to human activities, as we know, due to combustion of fossil fuels. And we've talked about this before. So not only does the addition of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere increase global warming, but it can also increase the amount of carbonic acid formed, thereby causing future rainfall to fall. Now, carbon dioxide forming carbonic acid is not the main culprit, and it does not affect the pH of rainfall as much as the other gases do, but it can. One of the main things I was worried about is nitrogen oxides. Nitrogen oxide is produced naturally both through lightning and plant decay. And what they do is they release nitrogen oxides back to the atmosphere. But in particular, humans produce large amounts of them through the use of fossil fuels to drive our cars, particularly gasoline. And so as a result, what happens is when we get these nitrogen oxides produced, they will then combine with water droplets to form nitric and nitrous acid. And while carbon dioxide doesn't cause the pH of rainfall to fall significantly, our nitric acids do. And so this is one of the reasons why we have the catalytic converter in a car to help to prevent the formation of these compounds. Sulfur oxides, in particular sulfur dioxide or sulfur trioxide, which are produced significantly, for example, during the burning of coal, but can also be produced by cars and other factories, and we can have large amounts released from volcanoes, will go into the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid, and sulfuric acid will also significantly cause the pH of rainfall fall. Okay. Now, we can neutralize acidic precipitation if it builds up. And we're going to look at the impacts of this and how ways that we can do this in different ways, the impact of different ways. But one of the ways that they'll do this is if we have an area or a lake that has had significant amounts of acidic precipitation fall in it. So for example, if you had a lake in the Canadian Shield, significant amounts of acidic precipitation fall into it. It builds up into the lake, causing the pH of the lake to decrease. So now not only did we have acidic precipitation fall, but now the pH of my lake is acidic. Okay, and it's not like it's fallen to a level that would harm us, but if it falls below a pH of 6 or 5, then it could be harmful to the animals living in it. So what we can do is we can lime the lake where we add calcium oxide or where we add calcium carbonate. And both of these things would help to neutralize the amount of acid in the rainfall. Well, one of the beautiful things we have here around us is there's lots of limestone in our soil and in the ground. And so this limestone will combine with any potential acidic precipitation that falls in our area and neutralizes it right away. Now, some of the impacts of having acidic precipitation fall, and the reason we say acidic precipitation and not always acid rain is because we can have snowfalls with pHs below 5.6. So some of the impacts of acidic precipitation or acid rain is that it could cause the pH of a lake to fall below 6. And if our pH falls below 6, it can become dangerous for fish to survive because it can kill off fish eggs, and it can also harm the gills and decrease the ability of adult fish to breathe, resulting in their death as well. Okay, and so as a result, not only would it remove fish, but it could remove other aquatic wildlife and cause the pH in the lake to decrease, or cause the biodiversity in the lake to decrease. It can also harm the soil of that it falls on, and what it will do is it will kill off some of the microbes that are important for decomposing organic matter and releasing the nutrients so that the plants and trees can take it up. But more importantly, what happens is that when acidic precipitation falls on soil, it can cause metal ions to become released. And then these metal ions then would damage the roots of trees and plants and could cause them to die. Not only do coral reefs have to worry about the impact of increased water temperature, which then would harm the organisms in the coral, but at the same time, what happens is that uh, acidic precipitation in the ocean can cause bleaching of the coral. And not only will it help cause the organisms that make up the coral to die off, but it'll also dissolve the calcium carbonate structures that they grow on. Okay, the pH of rain would have to fall significantly for it to harm humans to a great degree. As we've talked about, pH of 1 on our skin won't necessarily hurt us, but if we breathe it into our lungs, it can. And so what can happen is if we have precipitation or rain that's low, then it can damage our lungs or our heart. And in fact, this happened in London at the turn of the century, the last century. So around the 1900s, because they heated their homes and used coal in their factories and everything, there was lots of carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur oxides in the atmosphere hanging over London. And then a fog came in, and this fog patch sat over the city for several days. And so we had our synthesis reactions occurring, forming our acidic particles in the water droplets that were suspended in the air, and people would breathe them into their lungs, and then they would get these acidic particles that would damage the lining of their lungs. Okay. Acidic precipitation can also damage our buildings and other things because it will react with the limestone or marble that make them. Okay, and they can also dissolve some of the metals that we use to build things like bridges. So as a result, we have to be concerned with the amount of acidic precipitation falling on these as well.